Here is a story from when I was 7 or 8. My aunt had moved into a new house, and this house, well, it was home at one point to an old man. According to records, he had lost all that was important to him, so he hung himself in the house. Due to the full disclosure law, my aunt knew this, but she was not a believer in the paranormal, so she didn't say anything to anyone else. I had gone over one day to spend the night. I was originally intending to spend 3 nights, but after the first night, my plans changed. It was around midnight when I was woken up by footsteps downstairs. My instinct was to wake up and call for my aunt and see if it was her I was hearing. But I didn't get a response. Instead, I heard what sounded like someone open and shut a door. So I thought that maybe my cousin was home and she was who I heard. I went back to sleep. I would wake up an hour later at 1 a.m. and there was the walking again. And this time I'd call for my cousin, but again, no answer. Bravely, I sat up and looked over the arm of the couch, as I had been sleeping in the living room, and tried my best to peer into the hallway. I didn't see much, but I saw what looked to be an older man walking up the stairs. Me being a young child at the time, I didn't think much of it. He was wearing slacks and a plain shirt. I likened him to being my uncle, so I sat back on the couch. See, I didn't think of it then, but my uncle only wore flannel and jeans, and this was not my uncle. Moments would pass as I tried to fall asleep again, and then I heard it, a loud thud. I didn't hear any yells, so clearly someone didn't fall out of bed. It was like something was knocked over forcefully. When morning came, I told my aunt and cousin what I had heard. My cousin looked at my aunt, knowingly, and my aunt sighed. She didn't know what to tell me, as the truth of what happened was too much for a child. There was the old man who used to live here. He won't hurt you, I promise. When I got older, my aunt would of course tell me the truth. And the thud I heard was him knocking something out from under his feet when he took his life, and where he hung himself in the bedroom my aunt and uncle slept in. And that day, after the occurrences happened, I made it clear I wanted to go home. I never did stay in the house again. No matter if the spirit was friendly or not, it scared me. My cousin would also tell me of some of her stories, such as hearing doors open and close, hearing him walk up and down the stairs, hearing someone turning the knob to her door when it's locked, seeing an old man standing by the railing for several minutes, and then how she'd blink and he'd be gone. And my favorite, how downstairs there is an old armchair, and you can sometimes see the cushions sink down as if someone is sitting in it, when no one actually is. And this house has since been sold and given to numerous new owners, all of which have reported similar eerie encounters. However, it has also seen 2 other self-tragedies. So from 2013 to 2017, my husband and I lived in this house. I'm into paranormal things, but never had as many unexplainable things happen to me before living there. And this house used to be a small airbase, or so the locals told us. The house had been renovated and was pretty nice. It was a split entry house. From the back, it was as tall as 2 stories, and the front looked like 1 story. Soon after moving in, I kept having these reoccurring dreams about walking up and someone being at the foot of my bed. Or in my dreams, someone was breaking in downstairs, and it happened often. At the time, my husband worked out of town a lot. I would hear someone walking in the hallway upstairs when no one else was home. At first, he chalked it up to me being home alone all the time. But eventually, my husband experienced some things too, and realized I wasn't making it up. One night, my husband and I were lying in bed and heard something walking on what sounded like the roof. It sounded like it started from one side of the house and walked directly over us. Then it just stopped. My sister-in-law and her husband moved in with us for a few months. They would hear the footsteps in the upstairs hallway too, and there was one evening, it was pretty intense, and it happened over and over. We were downstairs in the living room watching TV and heard the steps. So we all went upstairs and started looking in all the bedrooms, closets, or anywhere maybe someone could hide. Nothing. We go back downstairs, and this time we make sure to bring our dogs, just in case it was just them walking around. Again, more steps upstairs. So we search again, and nothing again. And this happened a few more times. Another incident my sister-in-law and I witnessed was when we were in her bedroom upstairs folding laundry. It was the middle of the day and a picture on the wall. The bottom of it lifted out and slammed back. I said, "Did you see that?" She said no, but she heard it. A few more minutes pass. It happens again. We freak out and leave. In that same bedroom, once her husband and she moved, we turned it into a gaming entertainment room. We had a large sectional and TV. We spent a lot of time in there. One day, my husband and I were in there watching TV when my son was at school and the door was closed. Then the door opened on its own. A friend was over playing games one night and saw a face in the window of the same bedroom. This was in the back of the house upstairs, 2 stories high. My husband and I were playing games in this bedroom one night. He was kicking back on the couch and I was sitting on the ottoman in the middle of the room. Something touched my back. It felt like someone drew an X. I turned to my husband and said, "Why are you touching me?" He said, "I can't even reach you from over here," and held out his hand to prove it. We had a glass in the middle of the table downstairs. One night, it shattered. It was across the room when we went down to check what the sound was. One time I was coming up the stairs, almost to the landing where the front door was, and I was on the phone with my mom. I heard these big knocks on the door, and it sounded like someone was pounding on it. I told my mom, "Hold on, I think someone's here." I opened the door, and there was no one. I walked out and looked up and down the street, and no one once again. It was pretty flat, no trees or bushes. I experienced a lot of weird things in my old house. I'm not sure if it was haunted or what. When I was about 10 years old, my parents got an actual house. Not an apartment, not a duplex, but an actual house. We were excited to move in, but it would not last long. At least not for me. It had to be the first or second day, and I was helping my father put boxes in the attic. He would hand up the boxes, and I would carefully navigate the attic via the crossbeams and place the boxes in spaces where we put boards across the crossbeams, so they wouldn't fall through. Sitting up there waiting for the next few boxes to be handed to me, I scanned the dusty darkness of the attic. In the back of the attic, in the darkest part, I saw a glimmer of light. It turned out that the glint came from the light reflecting off of a cage. And this cage was your typical dog cage, but was big enough to easily fit a Great Dane or Mastiff or human. I told my dad about it and he decided to get rid of it. But it was so big that it could not be brought down in one piece. I thought maybe we should just dismantle it and bring it down like that. I know these bigger cages have to be assembled. I would just break it down. Upon closer inspection, I realized the cage was wired together. Someone had reinforced all the corners and door, and there was no way we were going to break this down without cutting it apart. I looked into the cage, and in one of the corners was a bowl and a spoon. Last time I checked, dogs didn't use spoons, so this struck me as odd, even at 10. My dad ended up cutting it apart with wire cutters and threw it all away, over and done with. We were settling in rather nicely. My sister and I had our own rooms that we spent most of our first few weeks decorating and making them our own. The house was cool too, but over those few weeks I noticed that being in the house alone, or walking to the kitchen at night, had a sinister feeling. Like someone was waiting in the dark to grab me. I was 10, so I realized it could have simply been my childish mind making monsters up to justify my then irrational fear of the dark. But one night, I was given absolute justification in those feelings. I remember it like yesterday. I was sleeping in my bed, the foot of which was the closest to the door. My head against the wall, I was laying on my right side when I had an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I looked down past my feet towards my door. Standing there in my room was a woman who at first glance I mistook as my mom. It had to be 3 a.m, and I was baffled as to why my mother would be standing in my room at this hour. As I scanned down the length of her body, I realized that the nightlight I left on in case I had to use the restroom in the middle of the night was visible through her legs. Upon this realization, I was flushed with fear and looked back at her face. This was not my mother. She stood there with a blank expression, dead eyes, and matted-looking hair, just staring at me. I did what every sane 10-year-old would do in this situation. I covered myself with my blanket and began to utterly freak out. After what seemed like forever, but could only have been a few moments, I popped back out of my indestructible cotton force field to find this woman had vanished. I wasted no time. I immediately bolted out of my room and in an absolute panic burst into my mom and dad's room like my hair was on fire. I told them what had happened, and of course, my dad brushed it off and went back to sleep. But my mom still remembers that day. After that night, the house was never the same. I avoided going to the bathroom at night if at all possible. I hated being there alone, and if I was, I had to have every light in the house on. My parents hated that. I know that other people saw stuff there as well. It wasn't just me. My mother and I were sitting out in the living room one night pretty late, maybe 1 or 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep, so I went into the living room to watch TV. I guess it woke my mom up, and she had come to check on me. As we were sitting there deep in conversation, my father came busting out of their bedroom in his white t-shirt screaming, "Where did he go?" My mom and I looked at him confused. "Where did who go?" my mom asked. And there was a man standing over me. I swung at him and my fist went right through him. He walked through the door out this way. My dad was totally freaked out. "We didn't see anything," I said. My dad went back to sleep, and that was that. Over the years, things like that would happen. Shadow people, that woman would materialize and walk right past me while I was watching TV and whatnot. Doors would open and close on their own. Faucets would turn on and off on their own. Cabinets would open and slam shut. It was a full-on haunted experience, and I grew up in this environment. I was told by a psychic that I may be sensitive, and that is why the paranormal activity was more obvious to me. But for sure, others in the home saw things too. My mother would talk about seeing people walk by in her peripheral view. My then girlfriend, now wife, used to hear children laughing when clearly there were no kids in the house. Her and I heard a man laugh as if he were sitting on the couch right next to us. It was quite the place to grow up in. I don't know if it was being in such a heavily haunted place for so long or what, but it seemed that something happened to me in the time I lived in that home. I began to see things in other places as well, things most people don't see. I always just chalked it up to another unexplained event in my life and moved on. But that house will forever and always be the place I came to truly believe in the paranormal and the possibility of the afterlife. I was home for the summer from college. It was around 2:30 in the morning when I was arriving at my house. I had been out at my friend's house catching up and playing video games. No drinking or drugging occurred because that might explain what I saw. So I live on a T intersection and there is no parking on my street. I didn't want to block in my mom, and because I was a lazy college student and wanted to sleep until noon. So I parked on the intersecting street, as I had done many times before. It was dark, just as you would expect 2:30 in the morning to be. The hot, thick air had settled for a brief period. I parked my hand-me-down white a Buick LeSabre in front of Nosy Linda's house. I shut the door as quietly as I could to not disturb the silence of my neighborhood. Being a quiet neighbor is one of the most considerate things you can be. I put my keys in my pocket and I exited the car, even though I would need them to unlock the door 30 feet away from my present location. Again, I had not had a drop to drink or a bowl to smoke when I saw what I saw. I strolled to my front door anticipating a long sleep and taquitos for my breakfast. But what you'd call lunch. That is when I spied it out of the corner of my right eye, a black, shadowy mass standing on the corner. I took a few more steps as the cold shudder filled my body cavity, and then I chuckled to myself. What the hell are you afraid of? Nothing is there. Just turn around, I said in my head. With a smirk on my face, I turned around and saw it. A clear as freshly cleaned window pane. And the figure standing, or hovering if you like, was about 6 feet tall. There were no legs or arms, but more of suggestion that it had once had appendages. Its color was dark black, as if I were staring into the endless swirling pool of a black hole. The only other color this being emitted was a gray face. It looked more like the static of an old tube television on the wrong channel. It didn't so much see me as it knew me. It could see everything I had done and everything I would do. I stared at it for what was mere seconds, but seems like a day. Then I regained what little faculty I had left and sprinted the final few feet to my door. The keys shook in my hand as I struggled to open both door locks. As soon as I got inside, I looked out of the peephole, hoping to glimpse the being again. But I could see nothing. I ran to my basement lair and covered my head with my old stinky comforter and shivered myself to sleep. The next morning, I saw nothing and told no one until I tell you today, my friends. A couple of years later, I inherited my childhood home after my mom passed away. It's been over a decade, and I still have not seen the black shadow standing on the corner. I still look for it most nights.
Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Perhaps click the bell for notifications, and remember, hell is empty, and the devils are here.